having disproved the lost spirits wandering the streets of Hill End in part 1 of The Little Ghosts. It's time now to take a closer look at the real-life details from Clark Street in 1872. This is a map of the town layout from about 1872. And as you can see, it was a busy and populous area. Clark Street, from Beeches Hill to the north, ran down to Steele's Corner at Church Street to the south. This is a modern satellite image of Hill End today, and the street is still aligned as such, but without the populace. The street is less than 500 metres long, but as you can see, in 1872, it was uninterrupted by commerce for its entire length. For anyone who has ever visited Hill End, but is still not sure of where this photograph was taken from, then this is the location as it appears today, which in addition is probably the most recognisable views of Hill End. So now that we have our bearings, let's take a look at the things you see along Clark Street in the winter of 1872. Previously, from part 1 of this episode, we established that the scene was set, focusing primarily on the 2 men most prominent in the picture. The first of these men is standing in the middle of the road. He has, in the past, been incorrectly identified as Bernhard Holtermann. However, this is obviously a man of a much taller stature, with a full beard, rather than the preferred goatee style of Holtermann and knee-high boots that was favoured by men that would spend a lot of time trudging around in muddy conditions, such as a road surveyor. It's on good authority that the gentleman is possibly Leonard Abington Vesey, who was born in England and died in Sydney in 1880, but was a surveyor in Hill End in 1872. By turning the camera around to face the opposite direction, Merlin captured this view from where Clark Street transitions into Byers Avenue. And once more, Vesey can be seen, this time overseeing work on the massive draining ditches, which were located where the cafe and National Parks Art Gallery now currently stands. It now appears that these 2 separate photographs may have been taken only moments apart, as Vesey appears in both images. Firstly, supervising the roadwork on Byers Avenue, and now casting a curious eye over the sign writer, putting on his finishing touches onto Donald Manson's Hall of Commerce. As with episode 1, Sign of the Times, we can identify the sign writer by his mark, and if you look closely, we can identify him as J. Bryant. The usual trail of Hill End names and occupations records leads us directly to a painter by the name of John Bryant. Further research by Chris reveals that John was possibly the most prolific of the sign writers of Hill End, which will be a future instalment of The Things You See, but for now, let's take a close look at the Donald Manson Hall of Commerce sign. One of the beauties of the Holtermann Collection is that it captured the rapid transition of Hill End in a short amount of time, almost on a day-to-day basis. It is this time-lapse type of photography that also captured Bryant's progress on the Hall of Commerce sign. In one of the earlier images of Clark Street, Manson's can be seen shortly after its construction and without any signage. It's also interesting to note the remains of a large tree that once stood in the middle of the street and its eventual demise over time. Just a short stroll around the corner, we walk toward Denison Street, past the current site of the Hill End War Memorial. Reaching the intersecting Belmore and Tambaroora streets, we can see the rear of Hill End's famous Northeast store. But in early 1872, this store was still to be constructed, and over the top of Talbot's private school, which once stood in the rear yard of what is now Northeast, there was a clear line of sight straight to Manson's store, with its sign, in its early stages. We can see that the main body of the sign has been completed, but the finely detailed writing on the hoarding is yet to be added. Returning to Clark Street, and directly in front of the store, you get a better view of the featureless hoarding, and an even better view of the stump, still firmly rooted into the street. In this snow-covered photo of Clark Street, we can just see that the front hoarding of the sign has been completed. And also, the stump has since been removed and discarded to the left of the street. With the sign completed, it can now be appreciated just how much work went into the Manson's Hall of Commerce sign. The added details highlights the fact that Manson followed the goldfields, with stores from Melbourne up through the Victorian towns of Beechworth, Morses Creek, now known as Bright, Chiltern and El Dorado, and following into the New South Wales towns of Forbes, Carrajong, Young, Borrowa, near Dubbo, and even further abroad to the New Zealand towns of Hokitika, Greymouth and Ross. Referring back to the original photo, it's now clear that the old stump has been dragged back almost to the middle of the street, in preparation for its complete disposal. And in one of the last known pictures taken of Clark Street by Merlin, and now showing Northeast store, it has completely gone. Returning to the rear of Northeast, and at the corner of Belmore and Denison Street, we can see that the Ryan Brothers Wholesale Colonial Produce Store once stood in this location. But what is the significance of this? By studying this image of the Ryan Brothers store very closely, Chris was able to identify the sign writer as none other than John Bryant. But without a name anywhere to be found on it, how did he determine this? As we have already ascertained, we can confirm that by seeing the sign writer's name on the Manson sign itself, we can also assume that the gentleman on the ladder painting it is Bryant. And while it is difficult to distinguish any of his features, you can however make out his stocky silhouette, the rounded, almost safari type of hat, bulky overcoat, and his stubby little feet, indicating that he wasn't an overly tall man. This is one of the rare photos in the collection that was able to capture the sign writer at work. But when by chance Chris happened to be studying the Ryan Brothers sign, he again noticed the figure of a sign writer standing by his recently completed work. And there can be no mistake that it is also Mr. John Bryant. The stocky build, round safari-style hat, and stubby feet are all quite evident, but now we can put a face to the name. And in addition, it's the tools of his trade that gives him away as a sign writer. Off to the right of the picture, you can also see his ladder leaning against the fence. And at his stocky feet sits a wicker-style bag, which was possibly used for transporting other tools such as brushes and maybe even a sandwich, made by his loving wife, Elizabeth. If this is indeed John Bryant, then the only confirmation we need is to find this bag in the Manson Hall of Commerce picture. And if you look really, really closely, you can actually see it under the window and at the far end of the veranda. To have captured not one, but two sign writers, and and in addition the same signwriter in the Holtermann Collection, is extremely rare. But what are the chances of seeing a third? With the sign now completed, the signwriter, Mr. John Bryant, descended his ladder, collected his bag and tools, and stood to admire his artwork, the sign of commerce.
Thank you for watching.
Thanks, John. We'll catch you later. I hope you enjoyed The Sign of Commerce. Keep an eye out for part 3 of Clark Street, The Cold War.